first grade. Today's story is called Go for the Moon. A Rocket, a Boy, and the First Moon Landing. Written and illustrated by Chris Gall. The moon is out tonight. In the morning, 3 brave men will climb inside a giant rocket, blast off into space, and fly to the moon. And for the first time ever, people will try to walk on it. I'm so excited that I can't sleep. The astronauts are ready for the mission, and so am I. Weeks ago, I started building my rocket. It is small. I had to read the instructions very carefully. Everything has to fit together perfectly, or it will not fly. Our television screen has no color, only black and white. The picture jumps and sometimes it looks like snow. The reporter said that the astronauts are preparing carefully. They will need a huge amount of thrust to leave Earth. Thrust lifts the rocket off the ground and away from Earth's gravity. The heavier the rocket, the more thrust is needed. The main engine on the moon rocket provides 1.5 million pounds of thrust. That means the engine is able to lift 1.5 million pounds into the air. But the rocket to the moon weighs 6.2 million pounds, or as much as 400 elephants. Oh my goodness. So it will need 5 engines to lift it off the ground. The giant rocket that will take the astronauts to the moon is called the Saturn V. It is 363 feet tall. So they've compared the rocket to the Statue of Liberty. Look how much taller it is. Oh my goodness. After I built my rocket, I practiced jumping to see how far away from the ground I could go. I am using thrust to jump in the air, but Earth's gravity pulls me down. The Saturn V rocket has 3 sections or stages stacked together. Each has its own set of engines and functions as a separate rocket. When a stage runs out of propellant, it will be left behind, making the Saturn V lighter. A lighter rocket needs less propellant and can fly farther with its payload, which is the astronauts, their spacecraft, and their moon lander. When the first stage runs out of propellant, it is left behind to fall into the ocean. The same thing happens to the second stage. The third stage takes the payload into space and pushes it to the moon. At the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the stages are stacked together in a huge building with the help of a giant crane. The crane can lift 500,000 pounds, or the weight of 30 large bulldozers. The person who operates the crane has to be very careful. In order to qualify for the job, they have to prove that they can lower a practice section into an egg without cracking it. I transported my rocket outside to the launch pad. My rocket is little, but I still have to be careful. Months before, after it was assembled, the Saturn V was moved to the launch pad. A giant machine called the crawler was driven under the rocket and the launch tower. It moved very slowly. It took about 6 hours to move the rocket 3 miles to the pad. The Saturn V engines create thrust by burning the propellant. The hot gases shooting from the giant nozzles will lift the rocket into the air. They have some labels here to show us more. Engine, kerosene, oxygen, rocket body, hydrogen, oxygen. The engines do not burn gasoline like a car, but a mixture of kerosene and oxygen in the first stage. The upper two stages burn oxygen and hydrogen, a very light, very explosive gas. The author says my rocket uses water as a propellant. I filled the tank, then I pumped the rocket full of air. When the air is squeezed, it is called compression. The compressed air will force the water out to provide thrust, and then the rocket will lift into the air, showing us the water and the air. On the morning of the launch, I have a good breakfast of eggs and bacon and my favorite orange drink called Tang. It is getting close to countdown. I need to get my little astronauts, on board. The Saturn V astronauts have their own breakfast early in the morning. They are sent to a special room to get their spacesuits. They need help. The special suitcases they carry will give them oxygen to breathe until their capsule is safely in space. 3 hours before liftoff, they ride to the launch tower and take the elevator to the top of the Saturn V. It is high above the ground. It is time for the launch. I check the area for safety. No branches or wires overhead. Check. No birds in the sky. Check. My brother tells me the launch pad is ready. The people who help the astronauts along the way to and from the moon are in a building called Mission Control in Houston, Texas. They can talk to the astronauts and check all the systems of the spacecraft from far away using radio signals. This is called telemetry. Because Earth is always turning and the rocket will be moving, they have to put antennas all over the world, even on ships and planes. My brother confirms we are go for lunch. We are go for the moon. You can count down with me. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, liftoff. To get to the moon, the Saturn V must be steered in the right direction. But the moon is moving around Earth, so it does not stay in one place. Like if my brother kicks a soccer ball and I throw a stone to try to hit the ball while it is flying through the air. This is how hard it is to land on the moon without flying past it. When the astronauts are safely circling or orbiting Earth, they check all their equipment to make sure everything is working properly. The direction and speed of the aircraft are measured from the ground. This is called navigation and guidance. To check the results from mission control, the astronauts use a special instrument called a sextant to find their position, just as sailors did long ago to guide their way across the oceans. After they have orbited Earth nearly twice, the third stage is reignited to push the astronauts away from Earth's gravity and toward the moon. In 3 days, the moon's gravity will be stronger. I climb through the hatch of my spaceship. Until I get to the moon, this will be my home. I bring food and water and power for the trip. I even pack a jar of Tang. The vehicle that will take the astronauts and the moon lander all the way to the moon is made of 2 parts. One, the service module with a large engine, and one, the command module. that the astronauts will live and return to Earth in. The astronauts named the vehicle Columbia. Cooling radiator, aft equipment bay, lower equipment bay, drag parachute, docking probe, main parachute, sextant, hatch. Lots of different parts on this spaceship here. The command and service modules are like a very small house. They carry everything the astronauts will need on their journey: food, air, water, and power. They also shield them from the cold of space. Electricity comes from fuel cells in the service module. They combine hydrogen and oxygen, which creates electricity. The electricity charges the batteries on board. The fuel cells also create lots of water, both for the astronauts to drink and to cool the spacecraft. The command module is not designed to land on the moon. A separate landing vehicle called the lunar module is safely tucked into the top of the third stage rocket. The astronauts have nicknamed it Eagle. The astronauts ignite explosives to cut Columbia free from the third stage. They turn Columbia around by using several mini rockets on the outside of the ship. Then they use the rockets to push the nose of Columbia into the hatch at the top of Eagle to pull it away from the third stage. The two craft are connected with latches. This is called docking. Here's the lunar module, the docking probe, latches, the drogue, and the command module. Now the astronauts can go from one ship to the other. Together they coast all the way to the moon. I eat my snacks from a plastic bag and I sip my Tang through a straw. I make sure I don't spill anything because in space there is no gravity. Any spills will float around inside the ship and cause trouble for the spacecraft and the astronauts. The astronauts sleep when they can, but it is not easy because there are many noises inside the spacecraft. They eat food that's just like the food on Earth, but it's dried out so it will weigh less. Water is added from a special water gun when it is time to eat. The next day, I get to know my lunar module. I have to climb a ladder to get in and out of it. It has no seats, so we have to stand to see out the windows. Eagle has two parts. The lower part has its own engine, which is used to slow down Eagle as it approaches the surface of the moon. The legs are extended before departing from the command service module and have large round pads in case the ground is very soft. The upper part also has an engine and room for two astronauts. It will carry them to the moon's surface and back to the command module after the landing. It is time to put on my spacesuit. The astronaut suits are like small spaceships. The moon has no air, so they have a special backpack that gives them oxygen to breathe and water for cooling. The suit is made of many layers. The first layer has hundreds of feet of tubing that carries water to cool the body. The next layer keeps the air inside, and the outer layer provides protection from heat and cold. Also, the suits are easy to move in. After Columbia has orbited the moon several times, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin say goodbye to Michael Collins. He will stay behind in Columbia and wait for them to return. Neil and Buzz climb aboard Eagle, close the hatch, and unlock from Columbia. Landing on the moon isn't easy. The astronauts aim to land at a place called the Sea of Tranquility. It isn't a real sea because there is no water on the moon. To get there, they have to steer Eagle exactly with just the right amount of thrust to slow down Eagle so they don't crash. The astronauts fire their engine to slowly drop closer to the moon's surface. I send my lunar model down a piece of string. If the lunar module goes down too fast, it will crash. If it goes down too slowly, it will run out of fuel and also crash. The string needs to be at just the right angle. A small computer controls Eagle. When they get closer to the moon's surface, Neil guides the computer to a safe landing spot. Carefully, he inches toward the surface of the moon. He does not want to land in a crater. Then, with a soft bump, Eagle lands on the moon. My whole family huddles around the TV. Everyone is so nervous that no one speaks. Finally, I see a shadow moving across the screen. On the TV, I hear, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." Neil Armstrong is the first man to walk on the moon. Buzz Aldrin climbs down the ladder next. I run around the house practicing my giant leaps. With the moon shining brightly overhead, I bound outside like a real astronaut. The astronauts spend 2.5 hours on the surface of the moon. They collect rocks, take pictures, and set up experiments. The moon has much less gravity than Earth, so an astronaut needs less effort to hop around. They jump like little kids. But soon it is time to go home. They leave their backpacks on the moon because they will not need them again. And they no longer need the landing section of the lunar module, so it is also left behind. Neil and Buzz ignite Eagle's engine and blast off to the moon. Blast off of the moon. Soon they carefully dock Eagle to Columbia. They bring some rocks and their pictures with them. Then they detach Eagle and aim for Earth the same way that they aim for the moon. They use the thrust from Columbia's main engine to push them out of orbit and away from the moon's gravity. Soon Earth's gravity will become stronger, and after 3 days, their journey will almost be over. Then they will be near home. The empty Eagle falls slowly back to the moon, where eventually it crashes and creates a crater. When Columbia nears Earth, it is time to say goodbye to the service module. The two parts of the spacecraft separate with a bang. The astronauts use little rockets to turn Columbia around so its large round heat shield is pointed toward Earth. The heat shield prevents it from burning up. The vehicle must enter the atmosphere at just the right angle or it will skip away into space. When an object passes through air at a high speed, the air is compressed in front of it and gets very hot. When Columbia reaches Earth's atmosphere, this shock wave will become almost as hot as the surface of the sun. When Columbia reaches 10,000 feet above the ocean, it is slowed enough and the main parachutes shoot out of its nose. Soon it lands safely in the sea with a terrific splash. Big balloons keep Columbia upright. The astronauts are home safe. They have traveled 500,000 miles to do what no human has ever done before. Thousands of men and women on Earth helped them get to the moon. Soon there will be parades and hugs and tears of joy. On this day, I have more thrust than I've ever had before. Back in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center, a new rocket is being prepared and new astronauts are training. The next countdown starts. At home, the countdown has started too. My next journey has just begun. In the back, we have an author's note and some fun facts. And the sources that the author used to give us all those facts and information. I hope you enjoyed this read aloud today. I love it because it tells us the story of the first moon landing, but it also shows some creative and imaginative ways that you can recreate the moon landing at home. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day.